start with what's different now, 2 years nearly after the death of George Floyd, and all these promises that got made about change in the workplace, change in the makeup of the workplace, change in the dynamics in the workplace. They were big promises when they were made. Are they being fulfilled in 2022?
I think it's still too early to tell. I can tell you though, there has been some progress since the whole George Floyd situation, if you will. We have noticed an increase in terms of the number of DEI positions. Over 100% increase in those types of positions were being filled. We've also noticed an increase, again, generally speaking now, we've noticed an increase in the resources being allocated by major organizations in this space. But in terms of have the total objectives and have they been totally fulfilled, it's still too early to tell. There's a long ways to go.
So to me, the thing that matters the most in the workplace is the actual diversity of the staff, right? It's great to have leaders who care about diversity and equity and inclusion, and hire consultants or even full-time employees to work on those issues. But if their workplaces themselves are not diverse, then it kind of defeats the purpose, at least for me. Talk about how much talk there has been about changing the dynamics, and then how much of the outcome that we've seen become different, especially in C-suites, right? Executive suites all over the country still are places that it's hard to break into if you're not white.
And that's where the gap is. We're still seeing that gap, excuse me, at the senior management level. They will talk about diversity. There were commitment statements that were certainly put out right after the George Floyd situation. But if you look at the statistical data, the majority of the C-suite level positions are still held by Caucasians. And that, and a lot more as you filter down into the organization, you will find some diversity at all levels of the organization, but it does not sync up where it needs to be at the senior level. So there's still that shortfall at the senior level. And it's been statistically proven, there was a study by the Boston Consulting Group, that if you have a diverse senior leadership team, you have an opportunity of generating 17% more revenue, because people want to do business with people that look like them. So it's one thing to talk about diversity, but it's another thing to actually have diverse leaders and then let that filter throughout the organization and engage all the employees throughout the process.
And hiring for diversity is an art in some ways. And I say that as somebody who's done a fair amount of hiring in my career. You have to do it differently if you're trying to create a diverse workforce. And I still wonder, I guess, whether enough hiring managers understand what that art looks like, and what it really means to attract a diverse pool of candidates and then be able to select for diversity, all while not compromising other standards, not compromising excellence, which you don't have to do. It is possible and necessary to be able to hire at a high level and respect diversity. But I guess I just don't feel like enough people really understand how that works.
And that's another challenge that businesses are grappling with, is shifting the paradigm. I'm comfortable, when I'm saying comfortable, I'm not, me personally, I'm just saying in general, people are comfortable doing things the way they've always been done. They will talk about it, but yet we may recruit at the same colleges and universities. That's not a knock on those colleges and universities. There's a diverse group of universities where there's a wealth of talent that people need to begin to tap into. So I would challenge organizations and say, are you now recruiting much more aggressively at HBCUs, for example? Are you using your diverse talent to get out there in the marketplace and talk to people? Don't just sit in the C-suite. Don't just sit in that ivory tower and talk about that commitment statement. It's the challenge is to get out there, talk to students, mentor them, give them the opportunities to come into the workplace to demonstrate what they can do. So it is still a challenge. That challenge is shifting or changing the paradigm from the old way of thinking into one that evolves into becoming much more forward thinking.
So I also worried when George Floyd was killed and there was this real surge in attention to DEI issues, that it was happening at the same time that we were dealing with this awful pandemic, which of course we are still dealing with. It looks really different today than it did then, but it is still really shaping a lot of the decisions we make and the ways we live. And I guess the reason that made me worry was that something like a pandemic is a disruption to people's businesses, is a disruption to the workplace. And I know from experience that even the best intentioned workplaces and managers who are committed to DEI issues fall into the trap of sidelining that when there are other things, that need to be dealt with, right? And the pandemic challenged businesses in financial ways, in management ways, and all these other things. And I worried that the DEI issue would get buried at least a little during the pandemic. I wonder if we have any idea at how well they navigated that.
I think, again, as I stated at the top of this discussion, it's still too early to tell. Yeah. Here's my concern. You are absolutely spot on. And with the pandemic, it's a natural excuse to say we have other things to focus on. I would argue that this is another reason why you need to focus in this space. And because if we don't, you're missing out on business opportunities, okay? And I think the fact of the matter is, if we continue to keep our heads in the sand in this space, organizations are not going to proceed. My other concern is just, as it relates to the pandemic and people watching their budgets, a lot of the DEI practitioners that are going into the organizations still are not getting the budgets to implement what they need to do. So now the pandemic becomes a logical excuse to say, let's redirect our resources to other spaces. Someone inside the organization has to be strong enough and really challenge the leadership of the organization to say, we still need to invest in this space. And the way that we need to invest in this space is to have the right people in the right boxes and to have the financial resources. Now is not the time to cut the budget in this critical area.
So we've really got about a minute left, but I want to have you talk just a little about 2022, what people should be focused on, what they should be thinking about to keep things moving in this area.
And what they should be focused on in 2022 and beyond is having a strategic plan in this space. I'm not talking about just hiring people and say, go hire more diverse people. No, what is your overall strategy? How does it tie into the business strategy? Make sure that you continue to engage your employees and also hold the organization accountable. And lastly, identify key metrics to help ensure that we are successful in this space of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Okay, Mark Lee, always great to get your insights on this and other issues. Thanks so much for joining us on American Black Journal.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.